Fabulous. Thanks, Sally. Hi, everyone. How are we? Good. I'm going to try and keep it loud, fairly high energy. I'm conscious I was sat there earlier on, and when the door opens, you can't hear a lot, so I'm going to talk to you, and then hopefully everyone will hear. I am Matt Macri-Waller. For anyone who doesn't know me, founder and CEO of Benefex. Day-to-day look after product strategy, roadmap, all things global for us. I got asked to do this talk on AI, and I feel a bit like an impersonator saying I'm giving you a practitioner's guide, as you're the practitioners, and what do I say? I'm here to sell you stuff? I don't know. I'm here to help, I think, is the core of what we're trying to do. But it's a big area. It's a massive, massive topic to go into. We have 20 minutes. As has become probably tradition for me at the Future Forum, I probably tried to squeeze too much in. I will endeavor to do it in 20 minutes. I will talk probably very quickly. And hopefully, I'll get lots of validation along the way. It is quite participative. We're going to go old school. We're not going to go Slido while you find your phones. So hopefully, you can all put your arms up, or many arms up if you feel like that. Sound good? Super. Okay, cool. I get to speak to lots and lots and lots of people every single day about various different things, but AI has been obviously a hot topic for the last couple of years. What I've realized over that time is when the bits I get really excited about is probably all this stuff on the left-hand side. It's like the plumbing of how it works, and that's really dull, I've realized, because I see people's faces kind of glaze over when I go, I want to really talk to you about how all these things fit together. What everyone really cares about is the water that comes out the tap at the end, that magical moment when you kind of, do something and it happens and it's kind of hidden. I think we heard Debbie talk about it earlier on, where I think AI is probably just going to get embedded into lots of these products and we just will stop talking about it. It will just become the norm and the different way we do things. But what I thought I would do today is just to really kind of level set a little bit about kind of AI more generally, and kind of, I think for me, just where are we at, so we're all in the same place. And then what I thought we could do is do what I'm going to call a kind of journey into consequence. And it's really trying to get you thinking from a practitioner perspective about how you might use AI, but more importantly, what consequences might you come across? Now, we're doing a lot of this in the real world and out in the wild, and consequence is a big, big topic in our business, and it's a big, big topic that we're talking about with customers. So I'm going to try and bring that to life to you today and kind of try and share with you a little bit of that experience as part of it. First bit of audience participation, give you a bit of a warning. Show of hands quickly. Who has consciously used AI in the last month? Amazing. Last week? Keep it up if you have. Last day? Last few hours? Interesting. Okay, cool. What's interesting, though, is probably subconsciously we're using it way more today than we ever thought we were, right? So if you've got the tube here, tube's now done in terms of traffic routing, mapping through AI. If you've got an Uber here, similar. There's just so much that's becoming embedded into our day-to-day lives. I think it's just fascinating to think about where it is and where it arrives. And so it's becoming, I guess, ubiquitous, not quite omnipresent as some people in Silicon Valley might want it to be, but definitely something we're kind of seeing much, much more of every single day. Now, there's a lot on this slide, but if you just focus in the center for a second, obviously artificial intelligence has been around for a long time. There are many different fields of AI. Obviously the one getting all of the kind of glamour at the moment is all the pieces around large language models, or as they're now becoming large action models. But in the center, you can see a variety of different branches of AI. And we'll just step through a few of them. Machine learning is kind of that piece of, typically think about recommendation engines. So think Netflix, when you go on, when you start to watch stuff, how it personalizes it to you, how when I go to my wife's accounts, it's all about murdering your husband or being murdered by your husband. I'm not quite sure which way around that is, but I sleep with one eye open. You've got kind of on the other side of that, you kind of got these expert systems, okay? So that's systems, if you think about, anyone do a tax return? Yeah. So those kind of systems that are really specialist at certain things and have really clear, deep knowledge about, and kind of expertise in them, tends to be what you see in those expert systems. Natural language processing. I'm assuming everyone's been on YouTube at some point. How many of you get those Grammarly ads? Yeah, not just me. Grammarly is effectively a natural language processing engine. How does it help you structure sentences, spell? If any of you are using Copilot, it's got some very similar functionality in there in terms of how you think about language and how it brings it to life. Computer vision, so probably most popular if you use an iPhone or an Android phone, photos, being able to kind of just search for people or write, I don't know, tractor, and it shows you my brain there. Images of tractors in there. Speech recognition, again, so think Siri, think Cortana if you're a gamer. So anything that can kind of understand you talking at it and then do something as a result of that. And then more recently, kind of robotics. So if any of you have seen Optimus from Tesla or Figure, there's lots and lots coming out now in terms of robots and robotics. I think the key thing for me is that A combination of these things is typically getting built into these large language models, and they're all becoming now more about how are you actually going to use them and what are the kind of modes that you're going to use them in. But at a foundational level, all of the AI that we have is made up of three things, okay? It's made up of compute on one side, so that's the kind of raw horsepower, so what I like to call the NVIDIA tax that seems to be in the market at the moment. But this is effectively the hardware that it sits on that enables kind of some of these amazing things to happen. In the middle is the bit we always hear about. So this is the models, this is the intelligence. So it's ChatGPT, it's Llama, it's Claude, it's Copilot. It's all of these tools that are there, and open source, closed source, large language models, small ones. That's the intelligence layer that sits in the middle. And then the often forgotten one is about how data is actually labeled. So if you've ever seen any of the things like, for example, computer vision, if you imagine a self-driving car driving down the road, it needs to work out what all these things are and give them labels so that it understands what it's doing and can take action accordingly, all right? But as we scale all of this up, the platform understanding data that is either structured, so the sorts of things we would see in systems of record and those types of things, or unstructured, is becoming more and more and more important, okay? Make sense so far? Aye. Okay, cool. I think, so when I say about modes, I think when we typically think about engaging with a platform, or we think about engaging with companies, services we buy, things we do, there's kind of three typical ways you do it, right? Maybe I go online, I make some choices, I do different things. Maybe I do that on my phone as well. I go and pick something from Amazon or whatever else. And maybe I talk to someone. These have historically been the three kind of core modalities of kind of how you would interact with an organization or a platform. I think what's interesting is we're starting to see a bit of a shift in terms of kind of people kind of moving and drifting away from a few of these towards a few others. And so I think web and mobile will kind of remain constant. I think we're always going to see those in kind of how we think about how we deliver. But as we kind of move forwards in terms of AI, I think what we're going to see this shift to is this idea of kind of conversation becoming more prevalent. And when I think of conversation, in this example here, it's kind of, you can do that synchronously. So that's a voice, that might be you talking to a person, that might be you talking to a machine, that might be a machine talking to a machine. Or on the other side, it might be asynchronous. So maybe there's a messaging going backwards and forwards. So think WhatsApp. There's 50 million businesses around the world that survive just using WhatsApp as their primary tool to find customers, communicate with them, service them, and deliver to them. So that kind of asynchronicity, I think, is kind of key. But alongside this, I think what we're starting to see come, and if any of you have seen the announcements from Microsoft in the last week, we're starting to see this real shift and drive towards this idea of how we get to agents. And I'm going to come on to agents in a bit more detail in a second. But before I do, I think the modality you choose and how you think about putting it together when you're kind of practically doing this will kind of depend a little bit on what it is you're trying to achieve for the individual who's going through that experience. I'll give you two examples. I asked ChatGPT on the left-hand side here, what should I present to a group of global award leaders about AI? And it comes back to you with these answers. On the right-hand side, I asked Google, which funnily told me to talk to Mercer, which I thought was quite good for me. But here I asked exactly the same question. And what's different in these two different modalities is how it answers me and what I then do with that. So on the left-hand side, this is absolutely definitive that it's got the right answer. It's the way it answers you. It's a single answer, and it's completely convinced it's right. Whether it is or it isn't, it's a definitive dialogue that you get once from them. And you might be able to say, well, that's wrong. I think that's wrong because I know, but it's definitive. On the right-hand side, it's much more about discovery. Here's 10 blue links. Here's some other places you can go to find this stuff. So as we think about what of these tools to use, a lot of it becomes important to think about what do we want the person to do with it, and what mode might they be in terms of what they're trying to do. Maybe they know what they need to do and there's a task they've got to get done and they know exactly how to do it. Maybe they're in that discovery mode as part of it. And so it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. And so what I think ultimately is going to happen is lots of people are saying like, oh, agents are going to eliminate all of us. None of us will have to work. We'll all just lay on the beach all day. Probably not good today in the snow, but I'm not sure that's the case. I think what's going to happen is a lot of this will become complementing, not eliminating. I think you'll see there's just different things for different reasons in different places that I'll use each of these different tools. But crucially, what we're seeing is I think this idea of agents is going to be the biggest shift. And when I say agents, it's definitely not this guy, disappointingly, I'm sure, for some people. And it's much, much more this idea of having a particular, I've put a little bot here, it could be anything, but having something you can talk to, send messages to, send text to, send photos to, send data to, and it goes off to do things. It has agency from you to go and make something happen, okay? So you think about it, it might go to your bank, it might make a transaction, it might go and find insurance for you, because that's a fairly soulless task, right? It might go and find your car insurance or something. It might go and check an invoice is valid and correct against another invoice, right? There's lots and lots of these things that they can do, and I'm sure that we'll see coming right across our organizations. But when it comes to people specifically, I think what's fascinating for me is when you start to think about how these can be used, in our world, what things could we bring to the fore that enables an employee to actually have a better and better experience? Or that you could just tell something to happen and over time it will. So maybe I want to, you to book me a medical appointment somewhere. Why wouldn't I have an agent that I gave agency to book that? It knows. It has maybe some guardrails. So these are the hospitals that I live near. It needs to be within this time and this time, or here's access to my calendar. And you'll start to see you'll have all these slightly different purpose agents that just take work off of you over time, right? And I'm not saying this is overnight, but I do think this is definitely coming and will be the biggest shift and change that I think we'll see in terms of AI's impact. When we think about those agents, I think this wheel is quite helpful. The left-hand side of it is how to think about kind of what are the inputs. So at the bottom, kind of left there, you can see the interface. How does the information get into the agent? Am I going to talk to it? Am I going to send it messages? Am I going to interact directly with it, indirectly with it? Secondly, it's then what happens in terms of the actual activity that it takes. So this is planning there. It's like, what's the logic that's behind it? What's it allowed to do? And then on the right-hand side of this, it's all the outputs. All right? So you start to think about, okay, what does it do with it when it goes wrong? What's the kind of happy path? What's the unhappy path? What happens as a result of that? How much of a guardrail might you give it? So is it got to be absolutely certain in terms of the answer it's giving? Or can it be a little bit more vague or wandering? Or maybe it's a bit more in that kind of discovery mode. And then on the bottom right, it's really a case of what does it do to learn? How does it get better? How does it improve over time? Because there's one certainty with all of the AI tooling. When you put something in place, have in the back of your head, this is going to get better over time because the tools that are informing it will get better over time. So don't design for today, design for that improvement over time. There's two bits I wanted to pull out very quickly. One, I've just called proof of concepts lie, and the other one is this agents of consequence idea. All right, so we're going to unpack these together. I'll just do one quick slide on proof of concepts and just kind of some things to watch out for that we've seen. And then we'll go a little bit more detail into consequence, and it gets much more interactive. Sound good? Super. All right. So obviously quite an emotive headline for a slide. But the idea here, who's been involved in a proof of concept in their organization or relating to AI or any of those kind of things? Anyone been involved in some stuff? Some of you? We're going to have to do higher hands than that later on because my eyesight's not that good. I feel like I'm at an auction. Did you bid on that? Like, just nodding. Well, I think the interesting thing for me is, I'm a big fan of proof of concepts. I think they're the right thing to do. I think it helps you learn a lot about how you might use these tools out in the real world and out in the wild. The thing to watch out for is this kind of long tail, okay? And I've just used search as an example here, but this is actually a relevant example in all of your organizations. Because what happens is your proof of concept will be on the left-hand side of this graph, all right? It's going to be in the, if I'm comfortable saying, it's going to be in the fat head. That's probably a descriptor for me. Fat head, chunky middle. I don't have a tail, but that's another whole conversation. But when you think of that piece of the most common things, that's always what we run to. Okay, what's the highest frequency of query we get? Okay, great, we've got to go think about that. We have to create something that solves that. When you do that in a POC, you sort of get a little bit lulled into this false sense of security that it's going to be as good on everything else. Whereas what you've given it is a whole load of data that you've got lots and lots of answers for, and then effectively, you don't think about some of the edge cases. Now, you shouldn't not do something, but it is that long tail that often we're finding catches people out. So it's just thinking through how you take that proof of concept out into the real world. What caveats might you want to put around it? Do you want to put disclaimers and warnings on some of these responses and answers? What level of comfort do you want to have? How locked do you want a model to be? Or how open do you want it to be in terms of the way it answers? All right, super. We'll go to the right-hand side of this. Oh, just before we get to that, this idea of agents of consequence. Every time you give an agent authority to do something, there is a consequence related to that, okay? And I think this is just a useful kind of exercise for us to do, is to understand what level of consequence would you be comfortable with in the room? All right? So the way we're going to do this is a quick show of hands, hopefully high up. And I want you to hold your hand up until we hit the number, I've just done it in pounds for the sake of ease, but we hit the number in pounds that you would be comfortable for the AI to make a mistake with and you have to pay for. All right? So, for example, okay, if it was like a mistake over £50, and you just put your hands down at £50. Does that make sense? If you're like an evangelist and you're like, no, it could be hundreds of millions and I don't mind, keep your hand up for the whole thing. Make sense? All right, we're going to see a ticker. Keep your hand up. Hands up. There we go. All right, here we go. Put your hand down when you're not comfy. Let's say it's the company's money. Let's go there. Oh, there we go. Look at that. I should have clarified. It's the organization's money. Interesting. Really interesting. Okay, there's always some tipping points in that slide. It's just, I think, a useful way to think about what consequence might you be comfortable with as part of this. Because I think, ultimately, I think we're moving from this place where we have these really clearly defined rules and policies to a place where actually we're going to have goals and guardrails that we're having to give these tools. And it's quite a different way of thinking because it's like, how much room do I give it to maneuver? How comfortable am I for it to answer, describe, talk on my behalf? Okay? And anyone see this? Show of hands. Come on, we're doing that today. Lovely. Okay, cool. For anyone who didn't see this, Air Canada launched a bot. That bot hallucinated a bereavement policy, told an individual person that they could have a full refund as on one of the tickets someone had passed away. What is hilarious is that the company that built this, Air Canada, said it was responsible for its own actions, which I think is a hilarious sentence in itself. Needless to say, it went to court and they lost. And the person got their money refunded. But if you think of all the expense to go to court, it's not cheap. Anyone want to take a guess at how much the ticket was actually? And they didn't really need to probably do this? Sorry, shout again? 300, bit higher? Just slightly lower, $812.02. And so they went through all of that for that. It was the only person that claimed against it. So anyway, the idea here, I think, though, is just to kind of illustrate, I think, that point of consequence, okay? So as we run into the last part of these presentations, I'm conscious I'm nearly over time. I've got 2 minutes to go. Hopefully we can get through this last bit. I'm going to put up a few different things. I'm just going to talk you through them, and I want you to keep your hand up if you're comfortable that an agent or a tool that's kind of got AI at the core of it would be able to do these things for you in your organization. Does that sound right? Okay. So, hands up for this one. And I'm going to show you. So this is simply somebody coming in and answering a particular query that relates to benefits in this example. Sorry, it's a bit small on these screens, but hopefully you're getting the gist. I'll try and talk it over. And in there, it's giving kind of fairly standard answers, maybe what you might see on a brochure or something like that, kind of standard page, kind of giving you a high-level view of the benefits and what's on offer. Okay, that's most of you still with me. Keep your hand up. We're going to keep going. This one here is a little bit different. This is much more bespoke. It's going to answer personally for the individual in question. And actually, it's going to create a specific avatar for that individual answer and actually answer the query or question as a result of that. That does speak, but we've turned the sound off for the sake of the fact that we were going to go quickly today. Okay, most of you still with me. Okay, next one we'll go through. This here is specifically starting now to answer based on policy information. So it's having to understand eligibility, it's having to understand who you are, and it's having to think about what do I put in front of you and what do I say. All right? Okay, most of you still there. It's good to see. That will keep looping around. I'll stop it for you, save you all go mad. This is other example here. So again, we're getting slightly more advanced. This is life assurance. So if you think probably big outcome, large consequence. Here, it's effectively summarizing the policy overall. So what it's doing is it actually understands the individual. It understands what they're paid. It understands what's available to them. It understands what they can do. It understands some of their situation as well as part of that. So in here, it starts to stray into using bits of personal information. So it will use PII, it will use salary data, and it will kind of understand things that may or may not be deemed to be still risky to say. So for example, at the bottom here, It knows you're a new parent. Maybe that is true, maybe it's not true, maybe the data we've got is wrong. So just show of hands, still got most of you? Okay, I'm loving this. Everyone's ambitious. All right, and then the last one, this is a full assistant. So this is somebody who is effectively going and taking a full enrollment journey just using an agent. So it's going to ask them some questions. It's going to take them through. For the sake of ease, we've literally just done it in a very quick, I want to add my partner to my private healthcare, for example. So it's just going to take me through that journey. And then maybe it's going to start to think about how I can book an appointment for them at a local hospital, those kind of things. Just a quick, for those who've still got their hands up, just push them right up for me so I can see. That's still quite a lot of you. Okay, cool. Interesting. That video carries on. I'm conscious that I'm literally 11 seconds over, so I will do the summary slide and try and get that out of there. This is created by AI. I'm not a big fan of Donald Trump, as it were, per se. There's a brilliant, if anyone saw the Balenciaga stuff, this is Donald Trump does Gucci, so it's just very funny if you want to go watch it. 4 things to take away. Agents are coming, build a model, think about it, think about how you're going to use that and enable that. Beware of what I call POCs bearing gifts. Just be sure you're clear about that long tail and what's coming. Focus on guardrails and goals, because that's how the machine thinks. It's not so much on rules anymore. It's about what guidance you're going to give it and what you're going to allow it to do. And then just get really clear on the consequence you're willing to deal with. And that might be different, right? That might be different for life assurance, where the outcome or consequence might be hundreds of thousands, to you selecting a particular benefit that's maybe £2 a month. All right? Thank you so much. We're on stand 24. Thank you all. Have a lovely rest of the day. Great.